Well, what did you make of that? So much to get into. Brilliance from Wales, brutally bad from an Australian point of view. The future of Eddie Jones will be uncertain, certainly the spotlight on him, but from a Welsh perspective they are going to be heading into the quarter-final, and I think based upon what we saw tonight there's an even better chance that we'll see them in a semi-final as well. But look, I'm here in Lyon in the stadium, so I'm reacting to this game. I'll start off on Wales, but I think a lot of the storylines that will come out of this match will be about Australia. There is so much to get into, so drop a comment down below on both of these teams, in particular I think from an Australian point of view, and where they go from here, because they look lost in that second half. Make sure you like the video as well and also subscribe to the channel. But let's get into it. So I apologise in advance if the majority of this video is actually on the Wallabies, because a lot of my thoughts and feelings when watching it were about them, were about the players. I felt sorry for them. It was about Eddie Jones and the bravado he's given us that they could win the World Cup and that it would all be all right once he got to a World Cup, and it came crashing down in utterly spectacular fashion. So I'll get on to that. Let's start with Wales, because it's a Wales team that coming into the World Cup weren't playing that great. Warren Gatland inherited an ageing team, and there's no doubt after this World Cup still a process of regeneration to come for this Welsh team, but they've turned up. They've won their opening 3 games, including their 2 toughest games in the group against Fiji and here against Australia, and it was a record win for Wales against the Wallabies, and in all honesty they dominated them. It's job done. As I've mentioned in the intro, I think they will probably be bound for a semi-final, presuming that they play the runner-up in England's group. I haven't seen enough from Samoa or Argentina to suggest that they could beat this Welsh team. And Warren Gatland, I think, is doing what Warren Gatland does, in that they're not the flashiest team. I know there were some good moments today, in particular that first try they scored in the opening 5 minutes of the game. Jack Morgan bursting through, lovely pass on his left-hand side. Gareth Davies, the support runner, to score under the post. But they executed the game plan that they wanted to play, and it's kind of typical Warren Gatland that I think Wales are a really difficult team to beat. They don't play the most flashy stuff, and in this instance I don't really mean it as a criticism either. In that second half when they had the lead, what was it at half-time? 16-6. They then got a penalty really quickly after half-time, and it was kind of one-up runners, hard to beat, low-risk rugby but not making too many mistakes, and they squeezed Australia, and in the end the scoreline was brutal. And as the fans start to head to the exit, understandably, I look around me, a lot of Welsh here tonight, and they will be delighted with what they saw from their team. A couple of players to pick out, but it was a good squad performance. Jack Morgan, I think, is increasingly growing into that jersey. There's a reason Gatland picked him as the captain. There are shades of a young Sam Warburton in terms of being made the captain at a relatively young age, but you can understand why he's been given that opportunity. I thought he was excellent, and also Gareth Davies as well. I mentioned him in the try he scored, but a lot of what he touched was turning to gold for Wales. He was key at number 9, particularly given that they lost Dan Biggar, and that might be a very slight concern for the Welsh if Dan Biggar's injury is a bad one. I saw him at full time. He didn't look too bad. I think it looked to be his pec that was possibly the issue, so I think he'll probably be okay, but that's probably something to keep an eye on from a Welsh perspective. So Wales, congratulations, job done, and they've done what they've needed to do so far. Let's get on to Australia. I mean, my overriding emotion watching it in the second half was sad. I felt sad for Australia. I felt sad for the Wallabies fans that were here. I was surprised at how many of them made it to the full-time whistle. And I felt sad I felt sad for the players out on the pitch. And look, I know the players deserve a portion of the blame, but I actually don't think you can rest too much of it at their feet. A lot of it is with Eddie Jones, and we'll come on to him, because it's a Wallaby side that have gone backwards. And the reason I feel sad, I think, is because of where the game is in Australia at the moment. I mean, would you say, I don't think we're overblowing it. This is the first time that Australia won't get out of the pool stage at a World Cup, the first time they'll fail to get to a quarter-final. Is this the lowest moment in Australian rugby history? Certainly in the professional era, and I would probably say of all time. You look at a country that have won 2 World Cups, but the last one of those was in 1999, 24 years ago, the best part of a quarter of a century. They haven't won the Bledisloe Cup for 20 years, and I worry with where the game is in that country. I want Australia to be competing with the very best nations again, but they got to the World Cup in 2015, and since then they frankly haven't been that great, and you don't really feel like that is going to improve anytime soon, and that makes me feel sad. It makes me feel sad for the Australian rugby public, and it makes me feel sad for a team that I want to be better. Let's talk about the players though in this game and what we saw, because there were a number of instances which are probably a reflection of what I've just mentioned, in that there was a complete lack of belief, I thought, in that Wallabies side. I said it after the Fiji game when they were chasing it, and it didn't look like a team that had the capability or the experience or leaders to be able to get themselves back into that match. And I think that was absolutely the case here. You could argue that they gave up a little bit in the second half, and I felt sad for players like Tate McDermott and Rob Valentini and Samu Karevi, who had some good carries in the first half, that were trying to drive the team on. But you just didn't have any faith that they were going to be able to. And there were a number of moments in the game that I think speak to a lack of belief, but also a lack of execution. When it was, and I got the notes in front of me, 20 minutes in or 25 minutes in, Wales were leading 10 points to 6. Australia got a penalty in the 22, a very kickable one, which would have made it 10-9, but they opted to kick for the corner. Now, okay, fair enough, you make that decision. I think they should have taken points, but sometimes you have to make those big calls when you're out on the pitch. They opt to kick for the corner, but they kick for the corner and they don't even put it 5 metres out. It was 7-8 metres out, which is already giving yourself a bit more work to do. They then completely overthrow the line out. Wales pick it up, boot it downfield, get a 50-22, and then moments later Wales end up getting a penalty and kicking the points. And in there is a 6-point swing, but I think is quite a good example of just Australia not being able to execute what they want to do at the moment. And the other example I wanted to pick out was right at the start of the second half. So half-time, it's 16-6 to Australia, and you feel the next score is absolutely crucial. So whatever Australia are saying at half-time in the sheds is they've got to come out firing. They've got to do X, Y and Z, whatever that plan is. Well, from the restart, they collect it. They get turned over because Wales held them up and made it a maul. That led to a scrum, which crumbled in the second half. Scrum penalty, and then shortly after that, Wales scored the Tompkins try, and the game was done. And those are a couple of moments where you look at it and you feel Australia at this moment in time are just not able to execute in those key moments. They were probably forcing it at times as well, and it's a side that unfortunately are going to be crashing out at the group stage for the first time. But let's get on to Eddie Jones, and let's start with selection, because I think this is an Australia team that have been set up to fail from the first moment, and I've hinted at it already. A lack of experience, a lack of leadership in that team. They needed a more experienced player at 10, because with the greatest respect to Carter Gordon and Ben Donaldson, who are good young players who I hope don't have their confidence too knocked by this experience, they needed someone, a Bernard Foley, a Quade Cooper, someone like that to be able to grab the reins of the sinking ship when they needed it, and they weren't there. And the same, I think, arguably with Michael Hooper as well. It was an Australian side who were lacking experience, and that paid at the key moments in some of these games. So Eddie Jones, there were loud boos before the game. There's been the news overnight of apparently he had a secret meeting with Japan for the Japan job just weeks before the World Cup over Zoom. And his selection, I think, he got totally wrong. And this whole campaign makes a mockery of what he says of judge me on the World Cup. We've got a plan to win the World Cup. Yes, this Wallabies team will win the World Cup and can win the World Cup. And the whole, this is the most negative press conference I've ever had to deal with. Well, there's why. 7 defeats in 8 games, the only victory against Georgia. And it makes a mockery of a lot of what he says. And is he still one of the top coaches in the world? What is the mood in that camp? The press conference is probably happening at the moment. I wonder what the mood of it is. I wonder whether Eddie Jones will resign. Should he resign? I personally don't see how he can stay on, because we've seen nothing to suggest they're going in the right direction. But not only that, Eddie Jones is coming out and saying we can win the World Cup. He's being bolshy. He's making these big statements rather than saying this might not be our World Cup. We're going to have to build for the future. And I know he has said that they're building, they're trying to reinvent the team, but I don't know. I think a lot of us have lost faith and lost patience with Eddie Jones and where he's taken this Australia team, and I feel like it is probably the right decision for him to go because he's taken the team backwards. But do Rugby Australia make that decision, or do they look at the Lions tour, do they look at Home World Cup and they still think he's the man to take them forward? Overall, as I found it an utterly depressing night for Australian rugby. I want them to be better. I want them to be good on the best stage, but they're not at the moment, and they're miles off it. And I wonder the damage that is being caused and has been caused over the last few years, which isn't entirely to do with Eddie Jones. I wonder how much of that is going to really damage the game in the long run in Australia. As for Wales, let's finish on a positive. Big thumbs up. 14 points from a possible 15. Top of the pool, heading through to a quarter-final, which I think they will be very well placed to win and get themselves to a semi-final. And they're not easy to beat, although I think the good teams in the world will have too much of them. But that's my thoughts on it. Drop a comment down below, let me know what you make of it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one.